Ifikile imini enkulu. Welcome to the Humans of JGF, a JGF holiday special highlighting the brilliant minds behind our vision. And today we are closing off our series by having the man who would stand in front of every class he'd teach and open the session with, "You are smarter than you think." I call him the king of shade. Anyone who's on Twitter knows exactly what I'm talking about. It is the chairman of our board, the one and only Prof. Jonathan Jansen. Prof, how are you?
Good, the king of shade. Man, I can live with that.
I think for what it's worth, you just need to take that.
I will just take it. I receive. I receive.
How are you this afternoon, Prof?
I'm good. Thank you, man. And just enjoying life, enjoying the beauty of communicating with you, with the honor of serving in JGF. It is. I don't know why they pay me. I don't know why they pay me for my work as a professor.
Why do you keep saying that? Because we were speaking a bit earlier, and I asked how you were, and you're like, "No, they pay me too much." What do you mean by this, especially in Cyril's economy?
You enjoy what you do when you look forward to getting up every morning. When you hate the holidays and you don't like weekends, because it interrupts your ability to think, to read, to write, to research, to teach. Then you sort of say, why are they paying me, for what I enjoy so much? I would do this without pay and remuneration. So, I think ever since I was a teacher, I had that sense that I was in the right space, and I'm very grateful because I know so many people who go to work and they complain and they look forward to retirement and they, blah, blah, blah. So I always feel that they're paying me too much for what I enjoy doing.
Let's backtrack, Prof. Do tell us, where are you from?
Yeah, so I was born in Montague in the, rural Western Cape, but my parents reared us in on the Cape Flats, and so I grew up in Steenberg and Retreat. If you don't know where that is, think of Muizenberg and about 4 or 5 k's south of Muizenberg, and so that's where I got my bearings. That's where I went to school. That's where I went to church. That's where I played my soccer. That's where I met my first golf. And that's sort of the area in which I, to this day, feel most comfortable, even though, there's so many challenges in that community.
All right. So, Prof, do give us a highlight of your journey that has contributed to the man that you are today, the man that sits on our board serving at JGF, the man who is convicted when it comes to the advocacy of education in South Africa. Take us to matric or grade 12, and from there, how did your journey unfold?
Yeah, I have to unfortunately take you a little bit back to what we now call, I suppose, grade 10, right? Standard 8 those days. And I wasn't, I was average. I wasn't very good at anything that I did. I just enjoyed playing soccer. I enjoyed listening to music. And, I did everything. I ran track and field. I did everything that normal kids do, but I was never sort of a standout kid, and the same is true for academics. My students today say, no, Prof, you're making this up. It isn't actually. I actually went to go look at my primary school marks. I was fairly average, until one day when I still remember it was the interval, playing soccer outside as I usually did, and my Latin teacher, we had a subject called Latin, called me and he said, you pretend that you know nothing, but you're actually very smart. You have potential. Now, I didn't know what the word potential means. When my mom came home from work, she was a nurse. I said, Mom, my Latin teacher says I have potential. What does the word potential mean? This is before Google, no? And my mom says, well, it means, son, you don't have to play soccer for the rest of your life. You can also do other things, And I can't tell you how on a 13-year-old or whatever my age was, I can't tell you what an impact that was. No adult, no teacher had ever told me that I was better than I thought I was, that I had potential. Ever since that day, this fairly average kid sitting in the middle of all the performance matrices, I don't think I ever came second again in class to anyone, whether it was at school in South Africa, university, in the United States where I was a student in New York and California. I just excelled because of one person who told me that I'm smarter than I thought. And, to this day, as you know, I don't miss an opportunity, whether I'm in the Valley of 1,000 Hills on Tuesday morning at Swadezenek's school, or whether I'm at a university this morning at Stellenbosch with young people. I don't miss a chance to tell them you are smarter than you think. In other words, you have potential, because if that could turn me around as a fairly ordinary kid, it can turn anybody around, and that actually is probably the single most important memory about my journey, my academic journey, that I love to remember.
Yeah. So after that, for anyone who's familiar with theological context, I would call it a burning bush moment when you see yourself and you are transformed, right? What about that moment transformed you to think about yourself more than just a soccer player? How did your aspirations get activated at that moment?
Man, it was that nobody had said that before. Remember, I'm going to school. I'm living in a community in which there's a lot of gang warfare, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of abuse of women, there's a lot of poverty. People are struggling. They were suckling, as we said in my lingo there, And so you don't have, your horizons are set by what you can see, which is factory worker, seller of fish in newspaper. That's my horizons. It's hard to think of it today, but those days that was nobody went to university, nobody finished school in my family, and there's a teacher that you respect and look up to. Those days we really looked up to our teachers, and he makes the time to call me out of the soccer match to tell me, I believe in you, if I may paraphrase. I know you have potential. That knocks you over, right? It's just words. I'm still the same person, but my whole mind shifts. My whole horizons move further ahead, and I start to believe that I can do stuff. And so suddenly you're studying harder. Suddenly you're reading more books. Suddenly you take out a card in the local library. Suddenly a whole lot of things that you wouldn't normally do. Suddenly I look for friends who are better than me, who study hard over weekends. You know what I mean? So that just triggered a set of responses in which I wanted to prove to this teacher that he was right. And in my psychology as a child, this meant that I can't just sit there and think things are going to happen to me. I got to go out there. So here was a clear example of how opportunity meets effort, and you make things happen for yourself, and so on. So I always say, I just want to add this. I always say to people, every graduation, I because I was a vice chancellor, I had to speak at every graduation ceremony. And I always tell the students right at the beginning, get up, please, stand up, look around you. You didn't get here by yourself. So many people in this room, including the gogo who spent the pension money to pay your registration fees. Let us just stay humble and keep our feet on the ground and recognize that so many people brought us to where we are. And I will never forget that.
And Prof, now with that kind of activation psychologically, matriculant Jonathan finished his last exam. What was written in the stars for you at that point?
Well, it's very interesting because, I was the first student at my school. Those days it was a big deal today anybody can do it because the exams are so easy. But those days, when you got a first class pass, it was something special. And I got a first class pass because I, by this point, put in so much and was sort of expecting to do well. But I still didn't know where to go because nobody, as I said, nobody went beyond school, And I was very lucky to have a friend. He was my age, but he had been promoted at his primary school. So he was 2 years ahead, but we were the same age. And he was also my soccer buddy. And he came home one day and he said to me, listen, what are you going to do? I'm going to university, And I said, what do they do at university? He says, no, you study. I said, but I just finished studying. I was study again. So I literally stumbled onto the campus. I couldn't go to UCT because of the race laws, even though UCT was very close to my home. So I had to make the very arduous trip to Belleville South to study at UWC because the government thought I belonged there. And it was really tough because we didn't have money to go up and down every single day, etc. And so I go to university and I get hit big time by the fact that, first of all, when you go to university, you can't study the night before the exam. You have to study every single day. That was a huge shock to me. Secondly, it's 1975-76. The students came into my classroom, my science class, and said, there's no more classes. We are declaring solidarity with the students in Soweto. I still remember putting up my hand saying, excuse me, where's Soweto?
Goodness me.
No, because at that time, nobody knew about Southwestern Township, in Johannesburg. Now everybody knows because of its historic role in the struggle. But those days, if you were only Cape Flats kid, you never didn't think of that. And so, of course, there was protest and there was staying away from classes. And I was underprepared because I was in a science lab every day, Monday through Thursday, botany, zoology, chemistry, and physics. And I had never seen a microscope in my life. I had never done a titration in my life. So in addition to being underprepared for a science class, in addition to the regular disruptions, I failed my first year. And that was a huge thing for me because, I was on the up, I was moving, etc. And also we had a fairly regular dose of racist lecturers. It's very hard to believe. But anyway, all of that stuff combined, including me being underprepared, meant that I failed the first year. And I left. I walked out. Oh, one day, I have to tell you the story. I came in. I got up at 4 o'clock, took the bus, the train, the finger, and the thumb, and the bus, taxi, train, finger. Anyway, and I got to my chemistry class. I'll never forget, organic chem. And I got there 5 minutes late. And as I came into the back upstairs of the professor said to me, I still remember his name, he said, you're late, leave my class. At that point, I was so frustrated, because the bus broke down, I had to borrow money to get, all of that stuff. And I walked out, went to Anchor East, asked them to give me a job, which they did. And I just decided, this is too hard. This is too hard. And that's where my mother one day came into my room and she said, you know what? I've got your uncle here. He's waiting outside. He's going to take you back to university. If she didn't do that, you and I wouldn't be here today.
Goodness me.
And so the road is never straight if you come from a working class home. The road is never straight if you have all these challenges, And I went back and I was so determined, and things just flourished, from there. So much so that Archbishop Tutu, or Bishop Tutu as he was at the time, said to me, to a bunch of us, you are going to become leaders once apartheid is gone. We're sending you to America to study for degrees. And I applied and got into Cornell University in New York. And the more I stayed in university, the better I got at it. And I've been very blessed.
And your conviction to practice within the education space, Prof, when did that moment happen for you?
I think, as I said, with this Latin teacher in grade 10, the something said to me, if this guy with a few words can change my life, then I, as a science teacher with a few words, can change many lives, And so I worked with young people, and this is so important. Every day when I'm in a school, I tell teachers the following, like yesterday in a school. Don't let other people tell you that student so-and-so can't make it, or he's in the slow class, or, you might start off with the notion that everybody can achieve. In other words, if you change your conceptual goggles, the way you see a child, and you start off with the fact that this child, well, not everybody's going to become a scientist, but maybe a great musician, maybe a poet laureate, maybe, a great soccer player. Start off with the notion that the child brings something to the classroom and figure out what that is and make them good at it. That's what teaching is, by the way. Teaching isn't math and science. Teaching is figuring out how I can connect with the talent in front of me and making them really good. So maybe this is going to be, an opera singer. Maybe this one is going to be a lab technician. Maybe this one is going to be a pilot. Whatever is given to you, figure out what that talent is and lubricate it, make it work for that student. That's, by the way, fundamentally what teaching is about.
So teaching for you was your primary choice and not a fallback career?
Oh, no. No, for me, it was. Look, there was a time in which I was thinking of becoming a chemist. I love chemistry. I love the pharmaceutical sciences and so on and so forth. But it's also true in those days that the only money you could get from the government was if you became a teacher or a priest or a librarian or something like that. But I have to tell you, the first day I stepped into a school on the west coast of South Africa, I knew I'm a teacher. I just knew this is what I enjoy. Because to take a scientific concept and unpack it for kids in a way that they can understand and see them get it, you have to be a teacher to know what that lights up inside of you. You have to be a teacher to understand how the thrill you get out of that. I used to ask my students, I'm not making this up, to come to school on a Saturday just so that I could teach them. I used to beg them.
Oh, for you, not for remedial purposes, but for you to get the opportunity to teach them.
In fact, when I taught matric, by the time my students got into matric, I'd already covered, because remember, the matric exams are based on 2 years those days. Yes. By the time they got to grade 12, I'd already covered everything in grade 11. That's why they did so well. I never had a failure, in biology was my main subject. So you just know, very often when I have a student now wants to do a degree, a master's degree, and he's doing it on the calling, how you're called, to be a traditional healer. Now, this is new to me. I don't understand all of it. But, I understand what he's saying. It's the same thing. When you call to be a teacher, the Afrikaans-speaking people call it a roeping, a vocation. It's not just a job, When you understand that you've been called to it, oh, my word, it's unbelievable. And so I enjoy university teaching as much as I enjoy, when I was in these rural schools in KZN on Tuesday, I literally asked the teacher, can I just take 10 minutes to teach the children? Just because I can't stop myself,
Yeah. So when we, JGF, we take seriously the journey to impact, and part of this journey is molding leaders within the education space. So as you said, that no one's career is linear. So you start off as a teacher. What career progressions happened which led you from an ordinary classroom to a lecture room?
Right. So I start off, it's a good question. I start off, as I said, with a BSc degree, and now I'm teaching. And I realized I don't have a teaching certificate. I got a degree in science, but not a certificate. So those days we had a UNISA that actually worked. And so I applied to UNISA to do this secondary teacher's diploma. Then I do that, and I realize I'm enjoying studying while teaching. I'm going to do a Bachelor of Education. Those days it was an honors degree. Then comes this opportunity. And then it was a very difficult time because this is in the middle of the struggle, right, in the 1980s. I don't want to leave my school. I don't want to leave my classroom. Now I'm in District 6 in the Cape again teaching. And this opportunity, as I said, comes up via Bishop Tutu and a scholarship that he had. And I was caught in a bind. My students are being tortured. They're being imprisoned. They, every now and again somebody gets badly hurt. I want to be with them. I want to be there for them. On the other hand, I realized this struggle was going to go on for many years. None of us thought, my generation didn't think there was going to be freedom, in our time. And, but now the other part of the story is I've been teaching the same stuff for now 6-7 years. And 7 years of teaching the life cycle of the fern, you begin to sound like a parrot, right? So I realize I need more knowledge. I need to expand my knowledge. And it then occurs to me, what if I can now teach not 5 classes a day, but 500 students a day, like at a university, and prepare them to become teachers, and they would go out and teach 5,000 students, and so on and so forth, a multiplier effect. So let me apply via Tutu. I get this master's degree, and I honestly thought, I got a Master of Science now, let me go back home and teach. And I'll never forget, a professor comes to me at Cornell in rural upstate New York, as they call it, and he says, I've just spoken to the graduate school and so on. You've been one of the best students we've ever had. We want to give you a full scholarship to do a PhD with us, a doctorate with us. I said, are you crazy? I can't do a doctorate, I can't even imagine doing a master's. But because I was getting better and better at what I was doing, I was beginning to enjoy it. They saw, obviously, like my Latin teacher, they see the talent, And then I got a little idea. I said, if these people think at an Ivy League university that I'm good, let me apply to other universities as well, because I now want to spread my wings, So I applied to Harvard and applied to my first choice, University of Wisconsin, Madison, and I also applied to Stanford. Within a few weeks, all 3 of them said, come. But Stanford said, we're going to fly you and your family over to California. We want you to come here, and we'll pay you while you're a student.
Sure.
If you supervise some of our masters in teacher education students. And going to the West Coast was the best experience, to a really great university. And, to this day, my professors who are still alive will nominate me for prizes, will bring me out there to give lectures, the other day called me to address the Senate of Stanford University. Now, that's a big deal for a Cape Flats kid, And so, but the moral of that story is, when we invited Oprah Winfrey to get a degree at the University of the Free State when I was there. And I'll never forget, we had this huge auditorium and Oprah spoke, and one of the first questions I still remember being asked by one of my students was, Miss Winfrey, what is the secret of your success? Because you grew up, in the South, it was very hard, you were abused, blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget what Oprah said. And I say this to young people all the time. Oprah said this, all of those things are right. I grew up in a very difficult situation. I shouldn't have been successful, blah, blah, blah. But when I got an opportunity, I took it. Yes. When I got an opportunity, I rushed towards it. You with me? So that's what I meant by opportunity and effort, if you can get those 2 things in the same room. And so, if you're poor, if you're working class, you don't get a lot of opportunities. But if you get that opportunity, you take it. And you're it. And that's my message, as you know, to every young person in South Africa.
Prof, you mentioned something interesting around, well, it's not even interesting, it really is mainstay for the context that you were teaching in, which is that you had learners that were being arrested and this, that, and the third. And there's a broader conversation that is happening now in South African classrooms where teachers are saying, I want my classroom to be a space where I teach. And by teaching, then I would assume that they're speaking specifically around curriculum. And I often can't escape the adage, the feminist adage, when it says, the personal is political. And we can extend on that and even say the personal is professional. So how was it for you to teach in such a incredibly violent time, where you are trying to do the work of advocating for the personhood of your learners, whereas the government and the broader narrative of the country says otherwise?
Yeah, that's, again, a great question. When I taught at Trafalgar High School, which is in District 6, which, as you know, is like Sophiatown. It's the area where the white government, brought down people's homes and put them in other places, And I remember teaching ecology, which is all about the environment, in biology. And the students, as I'm teaching them, they're literally looking out of the window, seeing their flats, their homes. There was a lot of flats being brought down by bulldozers. And I remember feeling unbelievably angry, but also unbelievably sad that these children would now be displaced to places like Mitchell's Plain, when for generations, black and white, by the way, lived in District 6. Your African artisans lived in District 6, but you systematically flattened those places, okay? And here I'm teaching. So I won't lie to you, it is extremely difficult to teach a normal curriculum. So one of the things that I discovered with working with Trafalgar High School, where I was a very political school, always been. And so I had enough mentors there who could say to me, you teach the official curriculum for the children to pass matric, but you can also teach them this more radical curriculum that engages them around the work of Paulo Freire, around the work of, other radical educators, and so on. So you somehow found a way to give expression to your political, anxieties and your political hopes for young people. But this is where Cape Town was very different, let me just say this, to that moment in Joburg, where people said, liberation now, education later. That was never true in the Cape. In the Cape, it was liberation through education. In other words, you've got to use the tools that you have, okay, in order to set yourself free. And to this day, I see education as a political project. I see education as a way that if I can teach you the best science ever, you are able to free yourself from poverty. You are able to free your mind from constraint. You are able to affect other people to do well. And so on. And that is something I'm very grateful for, learning from my, as I said, senior people who at the time were my mentors.
So do you think, Prof, for teachers who do have the idea or the thinking that the classroom is a neutral space, the classroom is the sacred space, untouched, unscathed by the politics of the day, what word do you have to those teachers in terms of just contextualizing the value of the curriculum, but knowing that you are educating people who come from a deeply politically driven context, be it that they're wealthy, be it that they're the other side of the spectrum, but we are products of the political age?
No, absolutely. And you can make it very real in the present. So I often say when I'm speaking at privileged schools, I say, do you know within 10 kilometers from your school with the largest, this is an actual case, with the largest aquatic pool on the continent of Africa. Did you know that within 10 km from here, I can take you to a school with pit latrine toilets? Do you think that's fair? Now, that's outside the school. Now, let's imagine inside the classroom, right? Where I have all the equipment to do science experiments. And in the other school, I barely have a teacher who's not even the science teacher. It's just the teacher who happens to have a free, period. Is that fair? And so just by virtue of the inequalities that are so observable, education is political. Then when it comes to content, let's take the Cape again, because I grew up here. Did you know in the curriculum there's very little about slavery? And yet the history of the Cape is a history of slavery. You with me? So the fact that we learn so much about Europe, so little about Africa, the fact that we learn so much, about technology and so little about power, tells you that the classroom is a political space by virtue of what it excludes, not just by virtue of what it includes. And if I have half an hour with teachers, I can convince them fairly quickly that, as you said, all of education is political.
Yeah. Prof, it would be remiss of me not to have you on the show, not for us to have you on the show, and us not speak about the daring approach that you have towards your advocacy towards education. Yes, you're a practitioner, but in our view, well, in my view, I'll own, your voice and the piercing nature of it speaks of a great activism towards furthering healthy interests within the education system. What do you believe is a thing that you've once said, a commentary that you once made publicly, that you still stand by, irrespective of how contentious it may have been perceived at the time?
Yeah, I think for myself, and in the words of one of my great heroes of those times, Steve Biko, I write what I like. In other words, there is something about my independence, because remember, in addition to being a teacher, I'm also a public voice, right? As I think you're saying. I comment on power. I comment on powerlessness. I comment on the fact that we're undercutting the quality of education and undermining the chances of children in mathematical by giving them mathematical, that kind of thing. So what people often ask me, don't you get scared? Don't you feel the negativity? And I say no, because people in this country died for education. They didn't die for public works. They died for education. What I'm doing is nothing. It's not even half of that. I wish I had the courage of so many of my students who languished in prison, went into exile, that kind of thing. Teacher friends of mine. So I feel it is my duty, actually, as a scholar, my duty as a public thinker, to point out where things are wrong. And it doesn't mean I don't love my country. It's precisely because I love my country that I want everybody to benefit from our democracy, and not only some that benefit, but this strong independence, the strong, and often I'm wrong. And people point that out, and I learn from it, and I change course. But the ability to say what you think without fear is probably the most important thing that I treasure in my personal life as a public nuisance.
All right. Prof. So now getting on to the JGF Fellowship, right? Tell us, when did you first hear about the organization?
Man, I think I was approached. I can't remember the detail now, but I think I was approached by some of the senior people there, maybe Anthony Farr, maybe with Jeremy, if I recall. And I've always been a great admirer of JGF. He was the first sort of genuinely left and progressive thinker in education, in higher education, during my times. And so I always looked up to him. And as you know, he became Director General in President Mandela's office. He was very quiet, very soft-spoken, not rowdy like you and me, but intellectually and politically very astute, And so the opportunity to be associated with somebody that for me was in the same intellectual space, like Eskiam Pashlele, like Chabani Mangani, that for me was like big, huge. And so when they asked me, I said, of course. Then the concept that you're going to take the most promising, the most talented, the most enthusiastic young people from across the country and offer them a wraparound program that prepares them to become teachers. Oh my word. Do you know how long I've waited for such an idea? You know why? Because very often, you mentioned this earlier, if I remember, a lot of young people who become teachers couldn't get into economics. They couldn't get into medicine. So, here's my fallback position. Let me do this teaching degree. Yeah. What you have in J. Schervel is exactly the opposite. I want to get into teaching, or it is a serious, option for me. It is my first choice. And as you know, from the students we select, they are top academic students in their high schools and so on, and in their first degrees. So the opportunity, I've always thought that equity and excellence is the same thing. I've never thought of this, you can have excellence or you can have equity. No. What you have in J. Schervel is a blending of these two ideas, where not only do you have largely, not exclusively, but largely black women students, at the same time they're the best students in the academic sphere, and they all want to become teachers. Man, that's how I think the idea got to me and how it grabbed me.
Yeah. Prof, I remember at Summit this year, 2022, you addressed us there. And forgive me if I get the place wrong, but when speaking about Professor Jake Schervel, you opened with the saying, what good can come out of, is it kumchacha or
Komadacha.
Komadacha, exactly, Komadacha. And the way that you humanize the person, Professor Jake Schervel, I must confess, the only information that I've come across is what the internet is willing to offer. What people have authored and it's archived on the internet, but the way in which you humanize Prof. Jansen, you made him a person, and it got me thinking in various ways, and we had a conversation about this at Summit as well with the candidate fellows, looking at what it means to hold the responsibility of a name. So as we are within this organization and we wear the merchandise, we wear the branding, that is someone's name. And finding the intersection between your goals and the legacy of said individual is quite a task that I think we don't necessarily take seriously, because the name comes with opportunity. So it's the opportunity and not the name. And what does it mean to preserve, more especially, the legacy of an individual of color in a world that is so happy to erase our existence? So, Prof, do share what it means for you to have the legacy of Prof. Schervel be all the more tangible to us, being part of the fellowship, but to the country at large.
Yeah, I think it is an honor and should be an honor for all of us to do our living and our learning in the shadow of somebody like J. Schervel, not only because he was a humanist, not only because he was an intellectual, not only because he was a political activist, but because he was so much like us. Komadacha, how many people even know of a place called Komadacha, And yet it wasn't Santon, it wasn't Kirstenbosch, it was Komadacha. And yet, out of those circumstances, as if to teach us, that you are not defined by your circumstances. So, and then, the world is in front of you. This is a man that gets asked by President Mandela, go negotiate the freedom of the Libyan bombers. That is a really difficult thing to do, given the amount of damage done and the losses and so on. And he goes and he succeeds. And so for me, it's, and the few times I've met Jakes, including speaking to him just a week or so before he died, I think what he would have wanted from us is not to be like him, but to be even better than him, because remember, he only had so many opportunities. We now, your generation has even more opportunities, and he would be honored, I think, if we continue to have his independence of mind, his commitment to something better, his ability to work with other people, his boldness in crossing over into very difficult conversations, very difficult, work environments, and to lead this country, into, when people say to me, oh, Mandela sold us out. No, Mandela didn't sell us out. Mandela could only create, the grounds for a peaceful transition. Our job is to emulate those men and women who came before us. And I think that is how we should relate to Joseph, not just to admire him in a romantic sense, but to emulate him in a social sense. And that, I think, would bring a smile to his face.
Now, Prof, you are chair of our board. I have sat in quite a few board meetings with you, and you, without fail, ask a question that, depending who you are, either challenges you or triggers you about situating conversations within the candidate fellow cohort to help them think deeper about what it means to be a teacher in this here country. What for you surprised you the most about being part of the Jake Schaval Fellowship?
What surprised me most was the dexterity of the fellows, their ability to think on their feet, their sense of a broader world. Now, that's not an accident. That's because you, in the design of your programs, in the camps, the conferences, and so on, give the students not only a sense of how to teach molecules and atoms, but give them a sense of how to be human in a complex world. That's what I love about this program, And so you can ask, as you noticed when we interact with the fellows, 2 fellows per meeting, almost always they challenge you back. They give you a sense of a bigger world, of a commitment to a better world, and so on and so forth. That surprised me most, is how ready they were to be challenged. But again, that's not per accident. That is because of the groundwork laid over 1, 2, 3 years to get young people into that space. So we're blessed with both fellows who coming in are highly talented, but going out are highly committed.
As an extension of that, what about the candidate fellows at JGF gives you hope that the South African classroom is in good hands?
Because they're not alone. So we obviously see a highly selective group of young people. But you see, I see the rest as well. I see students, young people, young teachers who've not come through, had the privilege of coming through JSCAVL, but they obviously didn't get the same level of inputs, but they have the same commitment. I am so comfortable about the future of our country because, the problem we have, we don't see JGF fellows every morning on SABC. What we see is another criminal. What we see is another crook. What we see is, and you begin to get a distorted view of what the country is really like. And so for me, working with these fellows, I get a sense, a very profound sense, that they will lead us. They won't just teach in a classroom. They will lead in a country. And that is a very exciting thing to see.
Prof, you are a man of words, right? Forgive me if I sound, if what I'm trying to say here doesn't land in the manner in which I hope, but you are a man of words, great words, not without actions. But the more you share about your journey, the more we get to see that it took a Latin teacher to say a word to you, activate something within you, and thus you take seriously what it is that you say, whether it is palatable or not, whether you find yourself skating on the right side of the conversation or not, however we define right and wrong in this highly conversational community that we are in. But Prof, we would like to thank you so much for your contribution to the fellowship. We take seriously your leadership. We take seriously the stripes that you have on you. In isiXhosa imivumbo iyathetha, meaning that the wounds we see this is, you're not just walking. Your canvas is colorful. You have a colorful canvas, and it is this canvas that we look to be able to then make decisions contextual to who we are today. So thank you very, very much for your wisdom. Thank you so much for your unabashed confidence in our candidate fellows, the team at large, and your hopefulness, even when you do tell the truth. That paints a picture of despondency at times, but there's hope still. So thank you so much for offering that to us as a fellowship and to many people within the country who really do take seriously what it is you say today at a time where there is an incredible leadership deficit.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your witness. Thank you for blessing me today. Thank you for, I do hundreds of interviews every year. Not all of them are as efficient and as searching and as deep as yours. So I do, and I mean that sincerely. So if I don't see you on CNN soon, you have taken a wrong turn. But well done to you as well. Be blessed.
Prof, you are our final guest for the Humans of JGF, our holiday series. Please, could you just share a word of encouragement to the team at large, to the members of the board, and to all of the stakeholders involved in making JGF what it is today?
10, 20, I want to say to all of you, 10, 20, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, I think, and I've thought about this a long time, but I think people will realize, this country will realize that the real turning point in the education history of this country was the invention of the J. Scarville Fellowship. Just watch this, okay? We're still growing, people are becoming to know us, etc., etc. But I'm telling you now, this might very well be the model for education, for teacher education, not just in South Africa, but across the continent, because of the quality of the people, the selectivity in your focus, the passion of your fellows. This is a turning point. Don't ever underestimate the impact that you are having and will have on the lives of so many young people across this country. I hope you can take that into Christmas or whatever you celebrate and realize that you are doing a good job and it will be well with us.
Thank you so much, Prof. And our final question, as you know, our mantra is be a teacher. And there's someone who's listening right now who's saying, Prof. Jansen, I don't even know where to start. I don't know if this is the career I really want to go into because of what it is that I see in the media, but there is a passion that is within. What words could you share to fan this amber within a lot of people who may be engaging your words this year on this year podcast?
Sure. My first words to you would be just realize you are not alone. There are so many of us in exactly the same position. That's the first thing. I want to acknowledge what you feel and see and fear and so on. But I also want to say to you, many of us have been there before. And the secret is to lead from where you are. Don't wait for the whole system to change for you to have your impact. Lead from where you are. Find allies. In every school I work in, there are 4 or 5 people who think exactly the same way and sort of say, okay, we feel alienated. We feel isolated. We feel our government doesn't understand us. We feel the admin work is creeping up more and more and the teaching work less and less. Find a way with allies to make that situation improve for you and be better for you. Never, ever close the door and sit alone and hang your head in disappointment. Find others who think like you, who want to change the world, who want to improve the classroom, and you will be surprised how many of us there are.
Educational leader, educational practitioner. I call him the king of shade, Prof. Jonathan Jansen. Good people, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. As you do know, we exist on the interwebs. You just need to go to your favorite search engine, type in the Jakes Travel Fellowship, and any and everything about us is on there. Ways in which you could partner with us and pay it forward. Because as you know, the issue of education, it is our issue as a country at large. Thank you so much for joining me again, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.